It is 9 days until May 17th. 9 days until Star Trek Into Darkness hits the big screen. And I thought I would take the time to do a movie review of all of the Star Trek films that have come before, starting with this gem right here. We could make this review series easier by telling you that all the odd-numbered Star Treks are awful and all the even-numbered Star Treks are good. But that wouldn't give credit where credit is due to some of the movies that may not deserve the bad rep that they've gotten over the years. Star Trek the Motion Picture is one of those movies. It was heralded by many as the movie that almost killed the franchise before it even got started. Now, was Star Trek the Motion Picture really that bad of a movie? Yes, it was. And no, it wasn't. You see, it's not really that cut and dry. It's not that simple. There are layers to this movie that people may not realize. So, Star Trek the Motion Picture was never meant to be a motion picture. If this movie feels like a 45-minute television episode stuffed with an hour and a half of filler, well, that's because that's exactly what it was. Now, the background on this movie goes as follows. Star Trek, the original series, had gone off the air. Gene Roddenberry wanted to do a feature film featuring the original cast of the Enterprise. But they felt that a science fiction feature film wouldn't quite sit well with the general public. They didn't do well in the movie theaters. So, Gene Roddenberry turned to what he knew best, and that was a television series. So he decided to write a second television series that shows Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise on their second 5-year mission. And this was often referred to as Star Trek Phase 2. But then something interesting happened. Star Wars came out. And then all these other science fiction movies came out. And all of a sudden, Hollywood realized that science fiction feature films really do sell. So Gene Roddenberry scrapped Phase 2 and decided to write a feature film with the original Star Trek cast. But he had no script. He did, however, have a treatment for the pilot episode of Star Trek Phase 2. The treatment was called In Thy Image, and it is basically what you know as Star Trek the Motion Picture. So if it feels like an overly bloated and long-winded television episode, that's because that's what it is. And that's what they had to work with. But does that make this movie a bad movie? Yes and no. Here's the brief synopsis of Star Trek the Motion Picture, in case you're one of those people that haven't actually seen it. The movie starts out, Captain Kirk is now an admiral, working in a swanky desk office over in San Francisco. The Enterprise is being captained by Captain Decker, who was actually the son of Commodore Decker from the original series episode, The Doomsday Machine, although that was never mentioned in the movie, that was mentioned in the book. Spock is no longer on the Enterprise. He is off on Vulcan, participating in the Vulcan ritual of Kolinahr to purge all of his emotions. And so at the beginning of the movie, we have a new captain, a little bit of a new crew. The Enterprise has been refit, so it's kind of a new Enterprise. And what happens, just like in every other movie, an alien menace appears on the screen. An alien cloud is barreling towards Earth. And as always, the Enterprise is the only ship in the area that can investigate. You notice that the Enterprise is always the only ship in the area that can investigate? Is Starfleet really that stretched thin? I don't know. So Kirk does what he does best. He goes onto the Enterprise, demotes Captain Decker, because he's Kirk, and he takes over as captain of the ship, and they go off to investigate. In the process, some crew members die, some crew members don't get on board. Spock, who's in the middle of his Kolinahr on Vulcan, somehow or other telepathically hears this creature, this thing coming, and decides that he needs to be a part of this. So he takes a shuttle, he goes to the Enterprise, and he becomes the new first officer. So all of the people are in place. So we get to this alien cloud, this telepathic alien being that is on its way to Earth. And long story short, we find out that this creature called V'ger is actually the Voyager 6 probe that had been sent out from Earth to investigate alien life forms. And it comes across a planet of living machines who reprograms it and sends it back to Earth so that it can report back to its creator, who's long since dead because NASA no longer exists in the 23rd century. So what we get is the Enterprise finding this alien cloud. We get one of the Enterprise crew members, a Deltan named Ilia, who gets abducted by this alien and reprogrammed and sent back as a robotic doppelganger so that V'ger can talk to the Enterprise crew. We get Spock going into this alien cloud and mind melding with V'ger, so he finds out that, hey, this machine is just trying to live up to its programming. And then we get Kirk coming in to save the day. And basically what happens is that in order for V'ger or Voyager to fulfill its programming, it needs to merge with its creator. It needs to merge with a human. So Commodore Decker and Ilia, who had already had a love relationship prior to this, merge. And we get this alien hybrid human machine thing. Maybe it's the Borg. They never told us, but that could very well be the birth of the Borg. And then they disappear into some other spectral plane, and Voyager has fulfilled its mission, and the alien cloud is no longer a threat, and everybody goes about their business. Sounds long-winded? It is. There is large portions of this movie where not a whole lot happens. The Enterprise is at warp, and it's got to be the slowest warp ship in the planet because it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. This movie is filled with a lot of talking. This has been commonly referred to as the cerebral fans Star Trek because there's not a lot of action, there's not a lot of blowing things up, there's not a lot of space battles, there is a lot of talking, there is a lot of pontificating, there is a lot of questioning about the nature of existence and the universe and the nature of machines and things like that. It's very much a talking Star Trek. Does that make it a bad movie? Not necessarily. The story is actually quite interesting. The idea of a Voyager probe going out into space, finding a planet of living machines and being reprogrammed and fixed so that it can fulfill its mission and then sent back to Earth is not actually a bad story. It's just very long-winded. There's not a whole lot of action. There are no space battles. Things don't really heat up. There's not this sense of urgency of, oh my God, these guys really need to stop this thing because it's just barreling to Earth. There's just a lot of talking. There's a lot of technical lingo. There's a lot of Trek speak going on in this movie. And there's a lot of Bill Shatner, as there is in all of these 6 original Star Trek films. So, is it a bad story? Not necessarily. It's quite a good story. I think the story is actually good. It's just a very long-winded movie. It's a movie that could have been trimmed by about 45 minutes. And because they rushed this movie out to the theaters, the movie that you got to see in the theaters was actually a not finished movie. Parts of the movie hadn't been scored. Special effects hadn't been done. There were parts of this movie that people saw in the theater that just weren't there. The movie wasn't finished. Now, the special edition of the movie fixed all that. It remastered the movie. It finished the musical score. It did the special effects. It cleaned it up. It made it look good. The movie is now actually watchable, without large chunks of it being missing. And it's not that bad of a movie. It's just really, really long. It's like the Stanley Kubrick movie, the 2001 Space Odyssey. It's just a really, really long movie. It's not a bad story. The acting in it is pretty good. The costumes are bad. The costumes are horrible, actually. The outfits that the Star Trek crew wear are actually horrible. They're like these gray leotards, and they're not very good. But all of that aside, the story is not that bad of a story, and if you can make it through the large portions of the movie where not a whole lot is happening, it's not that bad of a movie either. Just remember what I said. It's really, really long. It's like they're showing you how they get from point A to point B in real time, so you watch the movie like this. Is it worth your time to go watch? It is. Is it worth your time to own? I think it is as well. Especially the new remastered special edition, possibly on Blu-ray. It probably looks really good and it sounds really well. Is it the worst of the Star Trek franchise? No. We'll get to that one. So it's not the worst and it's not the best, but it's a good movie with a good story. And it's worth your time to at least watch it and appreciate it for what it is, a cerebral fan's Star Trek. If you like what you've seen, if you want to see more reviews, go ahead, click the subscribe, click the like, and we'll be back in part 2 where we do everyone's favorite movie, Star Trek 2.